In a world filled with conflict, in a universe comprised of differences, there's one thing that absolutely everything shares in common. We all exist. Including two guys named Jack and Michael, who like to chat about that very thing over a good cup of coffee. Let's pay them a visit, shall we?
Existence Brewing.
So how long have you worn it? Really, 5 years. I wouldn't have known. I wouldn't have known at all. Well, my buddy Jack's going to be here in a few minutes, so I gotta go. And hey, man, it was nice to see you. All right, cool. Oh, hey, Jack, what's going on?
Hey, man. Not much. What's up? Who's that?
I was just talking to this man. His name was Dwight. He's the resident on toupees. And
they have a resident expert on toupees.
Well, yeah. So he was just saying that he's actually worn a wig for 5 years, and I was telling him I wouldn't have been able to tell.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And it's Dwight, not Dwight.
It's
as you said.
Well, Dwight, or is it D White? I don't know.
You're never going to believe this. I've already spun a few tales about my father. This is absolutely true. I wasn't alive when this happened. But apparently, another one of the crazy schemes that he and his brother got into, they sold wigs. Speaking of toupees, sometime in the 60s, they had a wig business. They ran around and were traveling wig salesmen. I shit you not. It's honest to God. Mom told me she wouldn't lie. So my father, at one time, was a wig salesman.
Wow.
Door-to-door wig salesman. Imagine those days, huh, Michael?
That would have been the worst door-to-door, because how do you pre-qualify somebody for that? I mean, they open the door, and then you're like, in a second notice, you have to say, okay, is this my target audience or is this not my target audience? And if they're not, you're just like, okay, well, see you later.
I don't think you do qualify them. I think the mindset of a door-to-door wig salesman has to be everybody needs a wig. I mean, that is, after all, the mindset of salespeople. Everybody needs what you're hawking. So surely, even if the most bouffant hairstyle person, the coif of all, the coif de la coiffe answers the door, you're just same MO as you would with the guy who just gotten done with 6 weeks of radiation treatment next door. Just, hello, sir. You obviously need a wig, and that's why I'm here to show you whoever they were. So,
yeah, right.
Bouchard,
he definitely,
the Bouchard Wig Company.
He did. Yeah. He definitely did not need a wig. He was rocking the bald, and
doing it before bald became a thing.
Totally,
too, which is what you really gotta admire.
Yes, very much so. Well,
I don't like being a guy with a lot of hair in his 50s.
You do have a lot of hair.
Yeah, having like Steve Harrington from Stranger Things hair at age 50. Of course, I'm not a huge fan of the bald thing because I think it's like total capitulation. It's like giving up. It's like, well, alopecia has struck me viciously from some god that I've angered in the pantheon of hair loss gods, and so I'm just going to shave it all off and go bald. I'm like, nah, show off that ring. I miss the days when men would just grow what they could and then the wicked comb over. And
yeah. Well, this episode brought to you by Elon Musk and the letter X. I ran across an article in the Seattle Times not too long ago that I was just trying to catch up on it before I met Mr. Wigman. And space is getting a little crowded. Have you heard about this?
Space is getting crowded.
Yeah.
As in the final frontier?
Kind of,
Not
yeah.
Alaska. But,
well, yeah, okay. the final frontier. But what it is, there's a lot of different companies now that are involved in the space industry. So they're launching their own rockets. They're doing it for, whether it's satellites or discovery or science or whatever. But there was this really interesting article talking about kind of space is becoming big business. And everybody from Jeff Bezos, he has his own Blue Origin company to Elon Musk and SpaceX. So I don't know if maybe that had something to do with because the Twitter rocket doesn't sound as good as SpaceX. So
Space Twitter kind of has a ring to it, though.
Ooh, Space Twitter. That sounds illegal in about 5 states.
Well, at least in Utah. But then again, what is legal there?
Most definitely. Well, I would say, though, that might actually be the answer to why we were pondering why he changed. And that's why I brought that up, was as to why he changed the name of Twitter to X, is because he wanted it to coincide with his space program, which I could totally see, Mr. Elon Musk sitting at home in a Star Trek jumpsuit saying to himself, I must buy a social media platform and name it after my rockets.
Captain Musk, that just doesn't, no one wants a musky captain. You're not supposed to sweat under pressure on the brig or on the, deck of any part of your ship. You're supposed to be as sang-froid as possible in all situations. So right. I don't think Captain Musk has a nice ring to it, but yeah, maybe Elon Picard, if you were a fan of The Next Generation, I suppose, or Elon Kirk. Could have been the case. Yeah, I don't know. It seems to me, again, it's more money. It's just these rich guys now. Now the big thing you brag about on the block is, of course, I've been to space. Have you? Right? Yeah. Yeah,
his net worth. His net worth, by the way, just in case you were wondering, his net worth is $197.3 billion. Billion with a B.
I know this is like the 14th podcast we've done or something, and it's going to shock everybody that Jack Hansen would say this, but I have never pondered in my life what anyone's net worth is, unless it was my own, when I needed like $2.50 to get a cheap hamburger or something at 3:00 in the morning when my credit card wasn't working or something like that.
Oh yeah, it's become Google standard, because when you type in anybody's name, if you see the little about section on the right-hand side, and I don't know, how relevant do you have to become in pop culture society before you get your own little right-hand about? But it says, there's a little bio, and then it says born, how many children they have, and then net worth right there. And then it'll also list how many spouses they've had. Some of them have actually been married a lot more than others.
You do not have to be very high up on the A celebrity list at all to have Google searches put net worth after your name. I mean, just like put Dave Coulier in, for example. Type in Dave Coulier. I guarantee you, like, the next search up after just his name plain would be net worth. Everybody searches.
And I'm not talking about like the suggested searches. I'm talking about that little section that like pops up next to his picture. Like, that's become kind of a Google standard now, where it's like the auto-generated bio. So it's like, okay, there's a little bit of a history about the person, where they were born, where they, how many children they've had, how many spouses they've had, net worth, and then education. Height is actually something that Elon Musk is taller than I thought he would be. 6'2".
Bullshit! I'm not buying that.
Yeah, well, that's Jack Hansen.
Elon Musk is not 6'2".
That's Jack Hansen.
No. The thing is, how would you know? How would you know?
I don't know how you would be able to. You know what I would also like to see is, I would like to see a little link on that height. And here we go into the whole Google thing, where you can click on it and you can see all the celebrities ranked in their height. Because I'd like to know, how many celebrities are just as tall as Elon Musk, how many celebrities are shorter than Elon Musk, maybe how many, celebrity. And then, of course, they got the section below where it's like, people also searched for Jeff Bezos. So then, let's see, we click on Jeff Bezos. Tall is he? He's 5'7", so he's a little shorter. And I could see that. And then, it has his little bio and his net worth. And, net worth, that kind of, I know we've talked about it on this podcast, but it almost just kind of, it establishes our worth based on our net worth, doesn't it?
Internet worth? Like I said, I guess I am unique in the fact that I don't care how much money someone who is famous and sings, country music whatever, anybody that is notable. It's just net worth is next to everybody.
Yeah.
Now, you could probably look up Michael Elliott and it'll say net worth next to your name. The thing is, would they know? And I'm sure a lot of people have stood next to Elon Musk, but seriously, how many people have measured Elon Musk flat-footed, barefoot, from head to toe with a tape measure?
What's the standard?
It's not that I doubt necessarily that he's 6'2". I just feel like he's off. That measurement is off. I'd like to know where that comes from.
Well, I think it kind of comes from the same school of thought that the varsity basketball coach, when they're putting together the rosters and they say, okay, you're 6 foot, but we're going to say you're 6'4", so that all of the other coaches see, that they're a little bit taller. Interestingly enough, Bill Gates, his height is not on his little bio. Steve Jobs, how tall was he? It doesn't say how tall he was. So that might be a new thing. That might be a new thing where Melinda French Gates, how tall is she? Yeah, it doesn't say how tall she is either. So that might have been kind of a, if you were relevant in the last 5 years in the Google about, your height will be listed. By the way, in the world of Google, that's your vertical worth, by the way, so you could look it up that way as well. Elon is a Cancer like yours truly, too, by the way. His birthday's June 28th, so it's coming up. He'll be 53 this year. He was born a couple years before me. So interesting we share that in common. It is very interesting, isn't it? Yes. Yes, I suppose so. In some ways it is. I haven't seen his birth chart. I'm not sure if his time is available. There's a lot of famous folks whose birth times are not available, so you can't plot where their orbs are. So you can't see. So it's, you can kind of, there's a few things you can tell by just knowing this is in this sign, that's in that sign. But if they're not plotted correctly, then it's not as accurate. It's not as intriguing, I suppose, to look at someone's chart. And so we did do astrological charts a few episodes ago. So if anybody missed that, I would recommend definitely checking it out. But would you say that you could use that as a potential strategy for somebody, like understanding how they think or what they hold in importance? Well, the biggest thing I would advocate with the use of astrology is that it's a tool for oneself. So I would think the number one person you'd want to analyze based on their chart would be yourself. Mm-hmm. But I guess if you're going into battle of some variety, if you're trying to map out a prospective employment, I don't know, you're trying to hire somebody and you actually know, or maybe you're going into business with somebody, or maybe you're thinking about getting into bed with somebody, that's probably definitely a time when you could take a look at their natal chart and say, let's see, Venus Scorpio. I think I'd, just avoid another knife wound for this lifetime. So has Jack Hansen ever been on a date or where he has to do a quick search before he realizes, is this going to go any further? So if you're on a blind date, let's say, Jack, and all of a sudden you say, okay, so before this goes any further, what is your birth date and what time were you born? Well, as you can guess, just FYI, that whole thing has gotten me a lot of traction because females are typically vastly more interested in that than men. And they don't run into too many men who actually are knowledgeable legitimately in the subject. They'll just maybe know you might run into a guy that knows his birthstones or something like that. So anyway, but that wasn't the design ever. It was strictly out of astrological curiosity. Mine's a diamond. Mine's a diamond, by the way. Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right. Aries. So April. So, it's an icebreaker is what you're saying. Well, the thing I was going to say is we have to start talking about Jack in the third person now, or he'll refer to himself in that way. Jack hasn't actually been on too many dates. I mean, Jack's been with his fair share of people, I guess, by 50, not a lot, because I don't like dating. I never have, never did. And so have been on 2 dates, actually, I'd say. I mean, I have a girlfriend now, but we met under reasonable, rational circumstances. We met
where we worked together. And so I was able to become friends with her for months and months before we ever started hanging out outside of work. And we're still friends. And I would hope we're always going to be friends in similar circumstances with the one before that. But yeah, since Jack's divorce a few years ago, he's only been on a couple of dates. Those were setups, of course, from one of his friends who obviously doesn't know Jack very well, because these women, especially the second one, whew, wow. I mean, I hope she's well. And I do wish all those people well, but it's just like, I need a special flavor. I can't.
Would you say that credentials are an important thing for you?
Credentials?
Yeah, credentials. Like, they're who they are, or where they've been, or the credentials that they've earned. Would you say that that is important? Because you and I were talking about that not too long ago.
No, I don't think I've ever been too impressed by people's credentials, although I can understand why they'd want to put something before their name, I suppose, if they've worked for a degree or whatnot. Take a look at someone's check. Some of those dental things can get, because they have all those degrees you can earn in dentistry. So it's like Richard R. Martin the third, DDS, DRS, DIS, right. DDR. And I'm like, DDR, wait a second, that's the old Eastern Bloc. Like,
my favorite is always...
I do not want a dentist who practiced in East Berlin. I was very specific with the insurance company. In network, yes. Maybe, but not from East Berlin, ever.
They tend to not use as much Novocaine as the other dentists do.
They tend to inflict more pain.
Yes.
And you're always...
Yes.
And then, like, you're always searching for that tattoo in their hairline, that swastika that is there. And they're bending over to, like, and you're just like, yeah, and they're just like, oh, do you need suction? Or like,
my favorite is when attorneys often will have Esquire in their signature, Esquire.
The only Esquire I know of is Bill S. Preston from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think maybe I should start referring to you as Jack Hansen Esquire.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's interesting because it brings up a relevant point about our activities and the fact that I don't have a title attached to my name. You're no doctor, you're no guru, you're no sage. And people that are sort of either loosely associated with or more directly associated with this, depending on how you view what we talk about. But, like Wayne Dyer, for example, guy made a fortune selling self-help books and anything. Yeah. He was a doctor and he was a practicing physician before. It kind of led him to get into, I guess, the business, if you will, of being a guru. And Deepak Chopra happens to be a doctor. And, so it seems like a lot of these guys who get into, I don't want to call it self-help necessarily, but maybe trying to challenge people or help lead people onto paths that they would be enlightened or spiritually awakened. They do seem to come from a background that would involve some kind of formal education, that would involve some kind of a title having been accredited to their name, PhD, Esquire, whatever the case. What's that one that emeritus? I always love that one. Professor Emeritus. That means that the guy's too old to really do any good in the classroom, but they're still going to look him up when they need something, from time to time in case he remembers.
He's
right?
just a drain. He's just a drain on their budget, really.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But that was an important point for me to make, is that, look, I'm not a doctor, but I guess I play one in a podcast. But even though I don't want to, because I don't feel like you need to be, I kind of have an issue with formal education, I guess, as it is. You went to college, you graduated from college. I know, Michael, I did not go to college. I mean, I dipped my toes in the junior college waters, but I was actually in school still. I was actually in high school still when that happened. And it was really just more for my own edification. I just was interested in the subjects. It wasn't to get a degree or work on anything.
Right.
Because I feel like the secondary educational system is just too institutional for my taste. I feel like they don't spit out the critically thinking people that they really think that they might or that they want to. I feel like they kind of spit out model ready employees to go into certain fields. They really anymore, it's very preparatory for that real world environment, for an environment that's either very governmental or very corporatized. And that's what you get kind of ejected into when you grab that diploma and then flip the tassel around.
Oh, totally.
And they play. Yeah. So, and you can probably adhere to that because, I mean, you've been through the ringer. So,
well, and I do think that it kind of depends on what you're trying to get, right? So we're not conducting brain surgery here, so it's not like we're needing to have mass credentials. And if you were going to be considering someone to conduct brain surgery, I would recommend a neurosurgeon. However, I would say that, based on this podcast, we're really just trying to look at everyday occurrences, right? And big thoughts. And so I think part of the reason we do this is because we get pleasure from it, and we hope that other people do as well. But I do think there's a fallacy with credentials. I do feel like kind of some people really tout their credentials, and I almost look at it as a red flag sometimes when somebody has, this long list of books that they've written or whatever it might be on a certain subject matter, or a formal education that they have. And I think that sometimes credentials are kind of for the credentially minded people, right? And so they'll essentially put all of their critical thinking at the door, or their potential, let me sniff this guy out and see if this is somebody who really is somebody I should be taking advice from. They almost park that at the door when they see that somebody is a doctor, or if they see that somebody has studied at Harvard. I would honestly probably not hire an attorney to represent me just because they went to Harvard. I wouldn't.
Well, I would vet who the judge in your case is, and then figure out which attorneys get along best with them
based on their collegiate affiliation. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly.
No, but
backing up to what you said about big thoughts, one thought on that, I guess, before we continue talking about the credentials that are attached to people who are affiliated with these subjects. Largely, at least the ones that get in print and, go on these books, speaking, these tours and everything, and kind of become the guru thing. They're only big thoughts if you're not thinking about them all the time. If your mind is constantly messing with who won the hockey game last night, and do we have any Apple Jacks left for breakfast? And, not that those aren't important things, I suppose. Yeah,
totally. Food is important.
Ask the Hebrews when they're gathering together and first, again, talking about this God fellow, and they've all been pondering their, place in the universe and why am I here? And, those standard questions. They're going to say, big thoughts? What? That's not a big thought to me. You think it's a big thought? They're just their thoughts. They're sort of, so I don't think they're big thoughts. Honestly, I think they're baseline thoughts. And I think we've lost touch with our baseline thoughts about why am I here? I don't think it's ever a bad thing, at least once a day, to figure out a way to circle back from, the NHL or the NBA and Apple Jacks to why am I here? To what am I doing here? To what is my raison d'etre? Why am I here? What specific purpose? What reason have I come here to do what specific things? Mm-hmm. So I don't think that's ever a bad idea. And again, I don't mean to pick your words apart, but I think it's a great opportunity to throw out there that these aren't big thoughts. They're only seemingly big because of how small we've decided to make our brains as far as the little minutia that we'll take up so much time with throughout the course of our day. But the bottom line is that the concern, and the reason why I wanted to do those episodes and why it's interesting it should come up now, is because the point is that if anybody asks, well, gee, Michael, gee, Jack, what gives you the right to talk about these big subjects, these big thoughts, when we've got others in the world who have doctor attached to their name, and seemingly they have a right to actually go down these roads, whereas you really don't? I would completely disagree with that, and I would turn it around on whoever would say that. Not only do I have a fundamental right to contemplate and therefore speak openly and communicate about my own thoughts and my own feelings on why I am here and what the meaning of all this is, and all of that. But so does every single person on the planet. Every single human being, no matter what their background is, no matter race, color, creed, how much money they have, and certainly what title is attached to their name based on what formal educational hoops they've jumped through of flaming or dog poo-poo covered varieties might be. We all have the fundamental right and really, moreover, the responsibility to contemplate those thoughts all of the time. Maybe not constantly, but at least frequently enough that we are grounding ourselves with, hey, there's more to this going on than just I'm upset because the phone bill came and they messed up and they charged me for 6 lines and it's $5,000. I didn't make this many calls to Abu Dhabi, or whatever the case may be. We get so, like I'm dealing with a little problem like that today. And of course it's bank related. Isn't it funny? It's always the fucking bank. The bank, it's always a bank related issue that has me down. But it's true. Something like that, without going into detail, I'm planning a trip and somebody called me earlier today and said, oh, this didn't work. I'm like, oh God, great. And so I find out, but rather than having it send me over the moon, it's like, okay, I have a little issue that I have to deal with in this human world. But moreover, you use that as a reason to ground yourself in, hey, there's more going on here than that problem. I'll address this problem, no matter how big or small it may seem, but there's always something of greater importance than what are you going to get for Christmas? Where are we going to vacation this year? Yeah, there are big things that are, and seemingly, Michael, the worse things get in that way, the more we're forced to actually kind of deal with that. Because when you go to the doctor and get that diagnosis, or you have that swab or that biopsy they order, that's suddenly when you stop in your tracks and stop thinking about the Apple Jacks and the hockey game last night, and you start pondering, okay, this is big. Why am I here? What really matters to me? What's really important here? Because if that comes back positive, my life has just spun a complete 180. And now all of a sudden, I'm being forced to deal with the things that I should be dealing with at all times, but strangely, for whatever reason, have been allured away from hockey and Apple Jacks. Hint, hint.
Why does it always come back to Apple Jacks, right?
Well, it was sorry, Kellogg. That's what I used.
Jack and I are not claiming to give any advice on investing. We're not giving any legal advice. We're not giving any tax advice. This is just a kind of a pool of ideas and thoughts, right? And it is our right to, and I think you're 110% right for, somebody who questions what our credentials are, and I'd say, well, like, what credentials do I need?
I'm here. That is truly the only credential you or I or anyone else on the planet need to be able to say, I am allowed to think about these things. My place in the universe, why I'm here, is I am here. If you are here, and you don't even really have to touch about yourself and say, well, I kind of feel like I'm here. Maybe, I don't know. Fine. If you're here enough, that's good. I mean, if you have any reason to believe that you're here in any way, then you have a right to do that. And so I've always thought that was a scoffable notion. What gives me the right? That's what gives me, not only me the right, but more importantly, the whole world the right. And we should be doing more of it.
Well, these so-called experts, I don't know of like a particular situation, but you always kind of run across these so-called experts, or these people who want to say, I've been doing this job for so many years, X amount of years. And so it's like, okay, but then I immediately go to, well, how satisfied am I with the job that you're doing right now? And if I'm not satisfied with the job you're doing right now, you've been wasting your 50 years doing whatever it is that you've been doing, this so-called expert, right? And so I think sometimes it's a generational thing. I think sometimes it might even just be, like I said before, it is like the credentially minded, right? And we're not talking about going to the doctor and getting a cancer diagnosis or wondering why such and such hurts. And of course you would go see a doctor for that. We're just talking about really the sharing of ideas and the dispensing of ideas. And I also think that, touching on kind of what you were saying before, I don't know that we spend enough time in our day thinking about big ideas.
We don't.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the whole point, is that I don't believe that we do. And yet they should be our baseline ideas. The first thing that you should think of in the morning isn't necessarily why, because as Yoda taught us, there is no why, but maybe you just at least, rather than thinking about, gosh, I got to turn on, again, the highlights to see who won the hockey game last night because I dozed off because I doused my Apple Jacks in so much Apple Jack.
I also,
we need to ground ourselves in thoughts that are fundamental to the experience. And so, because we've peppered them with so many things that they're important to us in our own little world in this game that we play. But, the whole point behind saying when you go to the doctor and get a diagnosis or get a biopsy ordered and you're worried about how it's going to come back, isn't it interesting how it takes something that severe, that extreme to crop up in our life before we're sort of forced to stop thinking about all of those things that don't really matter, that add up at the end of the day to much of our life's thoughts. Mm-hmm. Much of our life's contemplations are about things that are minutia in the grand scale of things. Now, is anything unimportant in a universe that's filled with a vast amount of diversity, some of which we are given the divine ability to create? No. Apple Jacks are in some ways just as important, or they fit in some parcel amongst these bigger questions. But I don't think you want to make your entire focus the hockey game last night, or you don't want to make too much of your focus. I think you want to come back to, again, that 1,000, 100 million mile level view and say, okay, let me get a perspective on this and sort of go from there. I think it's healthy for people to do. And quite frankly, I think there are people that don't, sadly, maybe dare I say they don't know how to do it, mm-hmm. because it's just so vastly out of their purview. And I am concerned that it's because they all say, well, that's for those guru people to do. I don't have any business doing that. And that's where I panic and just go, oh, no. I mean, you got it back. I mean, we all have the right to do that. So
I also think that it takes a certain amount of brain power sometimes for people to get outside of their regular mode of thinking. And I think that one of the reasons why I think you and I get along so well is that we tend to kind of want to live in that space. We want to kind of play in that space, where it's like, yeah, let's talk about a big idea or something. And I think that to some degree, people would rather not even go there and jump immediately to, well, how can I trust what this person tells me? Well, I mean, do you really need a credential for someone to talk about AI, UFOs, spirituality, and, fill in the blank on any other topic that we've talked about on the air at this point, or on the podcast at this point?
Well, there are going to be people who are purported experts in all of those subjects because they got their hands a little dirtier in them than we do. I mean, we're outsiders who may be like, we're both gobbling up information or grazing on certain things that we'll read online or documentaries that we'll see. So we're gathering information and we're retaining it, and then we're spewing it out, we're regurgitating it. And that's the basics of knowledge is, exposure, retention, and recall. But there are people who are going to be more expertly, they're going to have more expertise because they are more immersed in it. They are actually doing the research that we are reading, that we are soaking up.
And we would welcome their feedback, 110%.
Well, yeah. But if it's something that we're all already experts in being here. There's you can't argue with that. First person that comes up to you, I mean, how would you feel if you went, let's say you leave your house right now and go get a hero sandwich, and you standing in line to get your hero sandwich, or you're having your sandwich artist, gag me, by the way, Subway, that's the worst thing I've ever heard in my life. You're not a sandwich artist. You are a slave for $5.80 an hour that's listening to somebody like want more tomatoes.
They just had to come up with some other title.
Oh my God, that's just despicable. Anyway, so you're standing there waiting for your hero sandwich, and someone has the temerity to waltz up to you and say, hey, you got no business being here. You got no business thinking about, I know what you're thinking about right now. You got no business thinking about that. And first thing is like,
oh yeah, what am I thinking?
Did he really see me looking at his wife, or did he notice that I love his kilt, I was just trying to catch the breeze as he came in. No, I mean, how would you feel if someone came up to you and said, you don't have the right to be here?
Right.
I mean, so, I have the right to be here more than you do because, and here come the, lame ass excuses, because And you know what? We create them every single day because and generally speaking, it is what? I have more money. So that's the number one thing. I have more of a right to be here than you do. I have a right to be here in first class.
That's a big one. And
you don't, because I have more money. I have a right to park here because I valeted the Lambo today for $580.
Well, and we let it go by. We let it slide. Let's face it. I mean, we do. As a society, we let it slide. If somebody commits a crime or does something offhand at a party and they happen to be a millionaire, then a lot of times in those circles, I've seen it happen firsthand. There's just kind of like a tongue-in-cheek, like turn your eye and let them get away with it kind of thing. And one of the things that I was looking into was there's this website called effectivology.com, and it talks about the credentials fallacy. And I think that that's kind of really what this gets back to, is this whole idea of putting worth on somebody's opinion, because in most cases, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about either recalling information that we've found and we're sharing, or whatever it might be. It's not life or death situations. And, you know, one of the things that they talk about here is how to avoid the credential fallacy. And in some ways, you know, we talked about the whether or not somebody is saying something that is trustworthy. I mean, it really comes down to trust, right? Who are you to say these things? But then I also think that it kind of also points to maybe the false worth that we put on somebody's words or somebody's opinion based on just their credentials. It can go both ways.
Well, why do you trust your dentist to drill a giant hole in your tooth? Why do you trust him to?
And I think we kind of have to step away from the medical field, because I think that's an easy one. Like, oh, well, why wouldn't we let somebody who's a pilot fly us to Maui? You know, I mean, that's an easy one.
Right. But my point was I don't think it's because they have the DR or the DDS in front of or in back of their name. It's because they have a practice, and because you heard about them from someone, or because the clinic referred you to them, or
they have
because,
a knowledge base.
You know, so they're it's not necessarily that they're credentialed. It's that they're also experienced, or that someone who runs a business, runs a large, you know, healthcare center or whatever, was willing to hire this person based on said dossier of, I went here and I've studied under this person. And, you know, so they vetted this person so you can feel good about going to them to have your kneecap removed and have it replaced in orthopedic surgery or whatever it is.
Let's step outside of medical and let's just talk about, like, say, for instance, they do this a lot of times in politics, or they do this a lot of times in news, where they'll be talking to a guest who maybe it has nothing to do with medical, but, like, let's say they're, you know, a political scientist. You know, or there's always some kind of let me tell you about my 30-second bio, my elevator speech. And so, you know, for example, is this person, they talk about this on this article, this person doesn't have the appropriate credentials, so they must be wrong. That's really what it comes down to, right? Is us judging whether they're right or whether they're wrong. And in some cases, the topics that we discuss, how do we know if we're right or wrong? You know, I think I would say that in some degree, we can't really prove or disprove some of the topics that we've discussed on this podcast. And I think that's what makes this podcast beautiful to some degree.
Well, and let's define doctor. Let's define, a doctorate. It doesn't have to be from the medical field, obviously. You can get a doctorate in a lot of things. It's a doctoral degree is a postgraduate academic degree awarded by universities and some other educational institutions derived from the ancient formalism, licentia docendi, it looks like. So we love the Latin stuff there. So again, you can have a doctorate in a lot of things. It doesn't necessarily mean you're a medical doctor.
Your PhD.
Right. So, you know, again, it all goes back to, I think it's kind of a mind game, though, at the same time. I think that when it comes to the very basic subjects of being here, look, I'm not going to take on anybody who's been to school and has been performing arthroscopic surgery for 25 years about the knowledge of the human body's tendons and ligaments and how you put them back together. That's going to be their purview. But again, our purview as people who exist as those who are here And the only credential that you need in order to contemplate that is to be here. To put that up for sale in some regard, I think is just a travesty. And so you should not allow that to happen to you or anybody else. Right. So if anybody ever takes you to task on that and say, it's a great movie. It's awful because it's happening now. It's supposed to be happening in the future. It's a Mike Judge movie called Idiocracy. I don't know if you've seen it or not, but it's a very, it's a humorous play on where we're going as a society because we're getting so stupid, basically, with putting it into lay terms. But, there's a part in there where they talk about how using big words or using language that is more than just very basic common language.
It's a defense mechanism. Yeah.
It's seen as being foofy. It's actually seen as being, kind of gay in the movie. And that's a bad thing to the male population who's all alphaed out. And anyway, so there's one part in there where somebody's saying, why are you trying to read that word? And it's not even a very big word, as I recall. So it's the same kind of thing. Why are you thinking about these things? Why do you want to think about these things? And again, I also feel like there's a shame that seems to be attached to it. There's this kind of like, we're at the basketball game right now, or we're hanging out at the bar and we're scoping out chicks. Why are you thinking about that? And it's just like, because it's a hell of a lot more worth thinking about. That's why. But your buddies don't see it that way because it's not cool. And I would hope that myth would be evaporating, because boy, are we at a time when we need to contemplate the very fundamentals of why we're here, because they are evaporating. It seemingly as we speak, at least our physical, we have a lot of liabilities to this place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think we need more critical thinkers in our world. And I think there's nothing wrong with somebody who doesn't believe what I believe. But I also think that you and I are probably in a minority when it comes to that, because I know a lot of people who they literally, if they don't feel like you believe exactly what they believe, they have already written you off and discounted what you're about to say, no matter what it might be. And I think that that's wrong. That's wrong in so many ways. And, it's also wrong in the crowd. I've thought a lot about this. I think it happened a lot more during COVID. But we've talked about democracy and what a beautiful thing democracy is and how it requires our participation. And people fought very hard for the system of government that we have. But it also requires us to be critical thinkers. And I think to some degree, a lot of people, and I've never read I've never read a study that suggests that there are fewer people who are critical thinkers in our society now than there were 20 years ago. But I would say that it probably isn't that far off track, because I want to say that when you and I even were in high school, there was an emphasis placed on civics, and there was an emphasis placed on learning how our government functions. Because guess what, kids? Someday you're going to be part of this society. And so it's important that you can exchange ideas and that you can listen to what other people have to say. You don't have to believe them, or you don't have to, think. That's the beautiful thing about living in a democracy. It's not a government that is totalitarian, and it's not a government that's going to require you to think, breathe, and whatever the same as the other guy. And so I think that is something that we lose sometimes by not having that social. And I think in a way, it's almost kind of a social disorder.
Well, again, I'd go one bigger and say, before we worry about what kind of a system of government we're in and what our part is in all of that, we have to realize that we're citizens of something that's bigger, something that's grander than what we've invented. Because all of the isms you want to come up with, democracy, capitalism, communism, Taoism, Buddhism, pick an ism, it's all human advent. It may have been inspired by something that seems to be otherworldly in some instances when we're talking about theology or other religions, but we have created those things. We have decided to indoctrinate the world with those compartments. And
Absolutely.
Generally, yes, you do need to you do need to follow along and adhere to all of the bylaws that whatever Grand Poobah set into motion so that, you can pass through the gates. There's a band that I'm not really a big lyricist when it comes to music. I'm really more of a sound guy, but there is a great metal band called Threshold, and I very much admire their writing. And there's a song of theirs written some time ago. There's a passage from it that says, we have a system, referring to the United States, and if you're not against it, you have to be for it. And I always felt like there was a lot of poetic injustice in that, basically underscoring the way that it really sort of is. And so getting back to, not having to be credentialed, not having to be part of something, I suppose, in order to really be a part of it and think about it. We're not saying that you have to arrive at a right or wrong answer, or an answer that is going to be deemed as wrong or right by anybody. That's a misnomer. So don't mistake you have the right to think about these things as, well, then I better come up with the right answer, or one that is largely agreeable to this community, that community. It's up to you. And that's the beautiful thing about it. Choice is a gift. We didn't have to get the gift of choice. Remember that. I don't know what snapped its fingers and decided to set all this into motion. Again, we could argue that, and we have, and killed millions of each other trying to figure that out. And it's a dogmatic, Ouroboros. It just keeps eating itself.
How's that working for you, by the way? How is that working for you, that conflict?
Yeah, exactly. But, so but the gift, whatever gave us the gift of choice, it's there. And you may be the only person that believes in whatever the answer that you come up with for yourself at this particular time in this particular space is. But rest assured, it's your answer. And so therefore, provided that, again, you vetted it to your own satisfaction, that's yours. Hug it, squeeze it, kiss it, love it, own it, take it to bed with you. It's your whoopee.
And what happens? What happens when we rely on the wrong expert? Experts,
I think many of us are relying on the wrong expert. That's what I'm saying.
Can be wrong. And I think that anytime somebody is an expert in anything, it always catches my attention, or a self-professed expert. Let the substance speak for itself, right? And there's a lot there to unpack what we just discussed.
Let me tell you a little story about a woman who used to do television with me some years ago. I had my own TV show. This was back when everybody got their own TV show, so it was no big deal. But I did do local television for 9 years. And no offense to anybody that's listening in this camp, but life coach. I mean, I think that's when we got to underscore. Life coach. Think about it, folks. Yeah. Life coach. I'm going to coach you on how to live. Well, first of all, no one can coach you on how to live except for whatever it is or isn't that makes you biologically vital. I mean, so life coach? No, I'm already alive. Thank you very much. So again, we're talking about how to live we're talking about how to live your life, silly, and how to do it well. Well, why would we hire someone who's a life coach? What is it that we're looking for?
Yeah.
And generally speaking, I feel like these life coaches, this particular woman who did this show with me, and I was not impressed with the whole notion of a life coach going through the door. But after getting to know this woman, I was especially put off by the notion of her being a life coach, because I can clearly remember one day on the air, we're talking live television here.
Yeah.
And, it was an audience of nobody in Nowheresville, but still this matters because it happened. And just off the cuff, I think we were talking about clothes, or we were talking about being out in public, or something that was somewhat relatable to this. And she said, oh, well, sometimes I just give fashion advice for free too. I just give advice. And I said, wait, what do you mean? You just give fashion advice for free? What do you mean? I was intrigued by that. So I stopped her in her tracks and said, what are you talking about? Give fashion advice? And she says, well, I just give people little tips, little hints when I'm out in public sometimes. And I'm like, so you mean if someone comes walking out of the bathroom and they've got a trail of toilet paper stuck to their right shoe?
Yeah, like that guy over there.
Yeah, like the guy we just saw come out. You intervene. You say, oh, excuse me, did you know? Right. And she said, oh, no, honey. She said, I did. And she always loved to do that, honey and sugar and Tootsie and sweet. I'm what kind of life coach pours that much sugar on me? Thank you, Def Leppard. But, I mean, so she said, "Oh no, not at all, honey." She said, "I go up, and if somebody's like wearing like shoes that do not match their top, I'm like, no. I'm like, oh, and you profess to be a life coach, so the very first rule of your life coaching is that we have to match the pumps with the top to your satisfaction, Miss Fashion Guru." That is the most asinine bunch of horseshit I've ever heard in my life. A human being has the right to mismatch any articles of clothing that they so choose to, or even do it by mistake. Why do you even care? What kind of audacity does it take, the chutzpah that it takes to waltz up to somebody looking at lettuce and go, "Oh, honey, excuse me, but that leopard does not go with your zebra on the bottom." And by the way, that's what she wore all the time. It was like all of these clashing animal prints.
Totally.
I'm like, look at who in the hell's talking here.
And
you know, I mean, let you do it. I've never said a word to you about it because it's like, well, that's her thing.
Yeah.
So
and let's put this credentials fallacy to the test. What were her credentials, might I ask?
She wasn't a doctor. She didn't. Her credentials were that she wanted to be, and that's the beautiful thing about life. See, I want to be a life coach. Oh, okay, fine. I guess then you're a life coach. It's one of those things you can literally just come up with and say, "I'm a life coach now." And you know what? I admire that because I don't believe that people need to be institutionalized in order to help others. I think that there are a lot of us. In fact, I think in some ways, every single one of us is put here with a proclivity to help other people. Now, it may only be by wielding a torch or, stacking up bricks or whatever, because they're just better at that than they are thinking about some of these issues or counseling people. But there's no question that healers come to this planet. There's no question that counselors come to this planet. There is no question that all of us have the ability to help not only ourselves while we're here, which we do a lot of, and maybe sometimes not enough of, but each other.
Yeah, and there's no doubt that they don't have something to contribute to the pool.
And I didn't arrive with doctor or
nobody did.
Again, Esquire or exactly tattooed somewhere on me. It's not there like the tattoo from The Omen. You will not find you might find 3 6s somewhere, but they're well hidden. But the other stuff you won't find anywhere on me or anybody else.
Yeah.
So it's a natural, we come in with the ability to help each other. So I like the idea of that. I like the concept of, hey, I don't want to go through your game just to get spit out the other side after 6 or 8 years with this diploma sitting on my wall that says I've read all these books and everything that Freud said is exactly right. Because what the hell does he know at the end of the day? Fine. Mm-hmm. He analyzed a lot of cigars and a lot of dogs and a lot of people. And so maybe he came up with a few answers that were right for a few people, a few cigars and a few dogs, but not for everybody. Yeah. So I don't agree with you have to go through the grist in order to actually be accredited to help somebody. I don't like that notion. So I like the notion of life coach. I just think we have to be careful with ourselves when we decide, hey, I'm going to start coaching people on how to live their lives. Wow, you better get your ass in check then, because now it's really time to walk the walk and talk the talk. To talk the walk the talk, all that kind of stuff.
A wise person once told me that you never want to take advice from somebody who will not have skin in the game or be negatively impacted by the decision.
Yeah, and I also like something that I heard. It was, it's never too late. You always hear things at the exact right moment, but I'd always wondered if I'd have done something with it in my younger life because it was shortly after I got divorced. And one of the reasons that I stayed and really married my wife, because I was honestly not going to marry her. I didn't even want to stay with her. And we had kind of a summer fling and I was kind of done. I was like, I don't think she's right for me. And my mother was the one who really convinced me to stick it out. And she really called me out on the carpet and basically said, Jack, you are too tough to please. You're hard on other people. And Mom was just iconic. Mom's word was gold. So I did exactly what Mom said. And it's not that I didn't have a decent marriage to this person, but I often wondered if I'd have stuck to my guns, what would have happened? Because you can't help but kind of wonder if I'd have listened to myself instead of someone who you shouldn't take advice from because you wouldn't want to trade places with them. And that's the advice that I heard, was never take advice from someone you wouldn't trade places with. And I'm sorry, Mom, I love you, but you had a terrible husband who was a sociopath who tried to kill you like 600 times. And so, so I think I loved that line when I heard it. at some point in my later life, never take advice from someone you wouldn't trade places with. And I don't think the idea is to want to trade places with somebody, because that too is, this was in, it's funny, this should come up too. My girlfriend and I were just watching this bizarre movie. She doesn't turn me on to all these bizarre movies. I don't like all of them necessarily, but she shows them to me and I just go, what was that? There was one she showed me last night called It Follows, some 2010s or 2020, a really recently made horror movie. And it's supposed to be some kind of a horror clad, like, allegory about social disease, right? And so what happens
How boring is that?
Well, so if you sleep with somebody, and I was just wondering about all the criteria. Was like, okay, so if you sleep with somebody, but what if you actually like care for them or love them or you're committed to them, or does it? It's all so nebulous. But anyway, the idea was if you sleep around, this thing gets attached to you, and it only attaches to one person at any given time. But it happens because someone has gone out and just had random sex. And so then this thing attaches to you and it follows you around, and it goes at walking speed, but it literally will go in whatever direction you are, and other people can't see it, of course. So it's kind of from the beyond, it's from the ether, and it will kill you so the only way you get rid of this is you have to sleep with someone else. You have to go and continue this, yeah. And so it's supposed to be this allegorical look at social disease and everything like that. But there was a part in the beginning where this young woman who was the focus of the movie was on a date with this fella who gave her this
venereal disease.
Well, no, it kind of like a venereal ghost or some kind of a venereal unseen killer or whatever you call this sort of thing, a venereal bugbear. That'd be a decent enough word for it. They're standing in line together and they have to wait to get in the theater. And then they go in the theater and they're still doing this. And this is kind of how this guy sees this other person that she can't, and knows, oh no, the thing is still attached to me. I still have this metaphysical gonorrhea, like challenging me to a duel. But she says, this is a game that I used to play all the time. Take a look around at the people in your nearby vicinity. So take a look at the people in the lobby or the people waiting in line, and then see if you can guess who the other person said that they would trade places with. And I just looked at my girlfriend and said, what a horrible game. I would never do that. I mean, we all know that obviously Jack Hansen has enough hubris to last for 1,000 lifetimes, but seriously, who would play that game? I would trade places with this person. I don't even ever think about that. I mean, I honestly can't tell you, like, I've never thought of that. It was just foreign to me. It was just like, why would I want to trade places with anybody? This is what I've been given. This is what I have to work with. And what I've been given to work with, for as much as I may bitch about it, isn't all that bad. And by the way, what this person that I'm going to want to trade places with has been given probably is a whole lot bigger heap of shit than I'm even imagining by just looking on the outside. So don't fall for that. Don't get into that game. And so when I talk about not wanting to trade places with somebody or somebody you wouldn't trade places with, I'm purely talking circumstantial or situational based on them giving you advice. So again, when we're going to life coach the world up, and I've had to do this myself, because is that kind of what we're doing here? I guess a little bit, because we're offering some thoughts. I am at least offering thoughts and suggestions on how you might make your life more progressive, on something you could try or something you'd start thinking about, at least to try and make your life better. I would like to think that perhaps I've been imparted with something from somewhere that would help you do that. That would make me personally happy at the end of the day. To both see you succeed and to know that maybe I did some good for the world too, on a selfish front. But as far as trading places with me, don't ever want to do that. No. And I'm certainly not going to make that go the other way.
I would never trade spaces with Jack Hansen ever. No, and I really, like, I think that also it's kind of like the fallacy of the grass is always greener. I think a lot of times we have a tendency to think, oh, well, that person has a lot of money, or that person drives a really nice car. I always kind of play the reverse game with myself, and I say, I wonder, when I run across somebody who is perceived to be, maybe very wealthy, let's say Jeff Bezos, for instance, I always ask myself, what is it that keeps Jeff Bezos up at night?
Well,
because there's got to be something.
I would imagine whatever it is, it's got a hydraulic lift, and it's at least plated in 14 karat gold, if not solid.
You know what I mean, though? It's kind of like we all come to the table with issues. We all come to the table with problems. And to think that somebody doesn't have a problem, or maybe somebody's life is better than your life, you really have to think about that, because that in and of itself is a real problem. And I think a lot of people get into that mind space and that head space of there's always somebody who has a better life than me. And oh my gosh, look at this. And it's stupid.
And consistently, it's money that tends to be the thing. I had a downer moment this morning with my radio audience because I ran my daily contest. Today is like International Hamburger Day, apparently, too, in case you didn't know. So very often my trivia questions in the morning show are themed after whatever the day is, or one of these, because every day has all these things attached to it now. So I chose that. And I looked up what's the most expensive hamburger on the planet, who serves it, because it's one of these egregious things that's
Kobe beef and
24 karat gilded bun and all this ridiculous stuff. So it's $6,000. It's a Dutch hamburger. You can get it in the Netherlands the next time you're there. But I remember saying to my contest winner this morning, I said, isn't that just awful? I mean, like, how? I don't think that you're in good straits if you have $6,000 to burn on a hamburger.
No.
And the guy just didn't get it at all. He's just like, well, I'd take it, that's for sure. And I was like, you're not even getting it at all. So
you don't have $6,000, brother, don't you?
Well, what I said, of course, was, just think about how many people that would feed. I mean, we're talking about one hamburger, and this is where I feel like we have thresholds, where we have limits, where we should have limits. There are limits to how much is enough. This whole excess 80s thing that we lived through, may have worked for the metal years. It may have worked for, what's the old saying? Nothing worth doing isn't worth overdoing. There's a point at which it gets ridiculous. I mean, seriously, a hamburger. I mean, start in your own world. I don't even like hamburgers. I like bison burgers. But so let's say, how much is Jack willing to spend on a bison burger before he caps out? Now, it's hard for me to get in the mindset of someone that can't afford a $6,000 hamburger. I'll grant you that. But what I was implying, the idea there, what I was trying to say is, wouldn't it be horrible to get into a position where $6,000 was like the cost of a Whopper, or even less in the case of people that have billions and billions served in their pocket, that you would actually forget how many people $6,000 would feed. And you're about to sit down to one meal that doesn't even come with fries. It's $6,000 and it doesn't even come with fries.
Well,
that's tainted to me. That's that's allowing something to get into your space and taint your intent.
Absolutely.
Because there is a reasonable threshold for, okay, I am rich. I have $50 billion in the bank and I own multinational corporations or whatever the fuck it is. But a hamburger is still a goddamn hamburger. And I'm not paying $6,000 for it. And if I'm going to get $6,000 out of my wallet, it's going to be to help other people eat plain hamburgers just the same as me.
Well, let's face it. The $6,000 hamburger, the only reason that makes the news, and we've talked about this before, is because it gets clicks, right? So it's, goodbye. I've been eating this for, over 30 weeks and here's how I lost all this weight. Or this game is number one for so many reasons. And, if your dog is making this sound, it really means this, that, or the other thing. And then you click on those stupid articles and you never get your answer. You never get your question answered, or they never answer the question in the headline most of the times. But it's clickbait.
Sounds like a lot of life coaches I know.
It's throwaway. It's throwaway journalism. Clicking on them and they never answer. Now I almost feel kind of bad that I used that as my example, but I didn't have in mind to build that in. It just sort of happened because it's me, and so I was just trying to be as altruistic as possible in this moment where I'm actually in some ways showcasing a $6,000 hamburger that's from the Netherlands in my trivia question. But it's just like, I personally feel like it's like winning those giant mega ball jackpots and things that they have now. I mean, I always say the same thing. There's a great saying that if you're
if you're happy when you're poor, you'll be happy with $1 billion. And if you're unhappy when you're poor, you'll be unhappy with $1 billion. Not that, we're necessarily poor. I mean, we get by. But I would be gravely concerned, quite honestly, and this is, taking someone that is as mindful as I am about so many things, or at least I'd like to think I am. I've been told so much by a number of people in my life who count to me, who matter. I would worry about me with that much money. I would sincerely worry if
I would worry about you with that much money.
Yeah, I don't play those games for a reason, and I would worry about any unexpected knock at the door to say that my old Aunt Tilly, who I never knew, is going to leave me $1 billion. I'm honestly convinced the first thing that I would try to do, and this would be hard, because that's a lot of zeros in this illusory game that we play. But the first thing I would try to do is figure out a way to give 90% of it away. Say, I don't want it. This money, this is so much money. I will never be able to personally spend this much money and feel good about it in my whole life. There's no way that I need anything that would be attached to this many zeros, that would be a house, a car, a boat, a plane, a space shuttle, whatever it is. This needs to go to help the world. And then trying to choose how that's going to happen, of course, would be the difficult part. Is, okay, I'm going to gift 90% of my $1 billion inheritance from my long-lost Aunt Tilly to charity. God, can you imagine the friggin' paperwork from the IRS, too? They'd have a heyday. Mm-hmm. But I would like to think that I would be able to do that because, security, I mean, okay, so you keep $100 million. A house in a good house in where we live costs maybe $750,000, 800,000, because it's an expensive place to live where we live. Mm-hmm. How many cars do I really need? Now we start piling up the things, and now we start piling up the extravagances and the experiential extravagances too. Remember, because it's no longer just the trip here or there where we're staying in the Motel 6 now. Oh no, now we're staying in the Ritz-Carlton and the best digs, and yeah. So to me, that is dangerous territory, and it's where the rubber really hits the road. It's where the fundamentals of, okay, you preach your whole life that you're this great person, you wouldn't take advantage of others, that you want to help the world, that you're altruistic. Now, all of a sudden, we've put that many zeros behind your name. Your net worth has just become a thing on Google, sir. Mm-hmm. How will you handle it? How will you truly handle it as a citizen of the cosmos, as a citizen of something that I firmly believe there is something called karma attached to? I don't know how karma works exactly. I don't know what it is or where it comes from. I don't know how it blends into all of the world's theologies. It's not my department. But I'm convinced it's real.
You don't have the credentials for that? You don't have the credentials for that?
That's a good one to have after my name, the Karma Police. Yeah,
the Karma Police. It reminds me a lot of Jeff Bezos' ex-wife. And it's been reported that she's given over $16 billion.
Good for her.
To charity. And that is remarkable. And meanwhile, Jeff Bezos adds another $100 million yacht to his fleet. That was the other section.
Speaking of the Dutch, meanwhile, and they didn't do this, but for a while, they were going to disassemble a vital bridge in the Netherlands so that he could have his yacht put together in the bay, because the parts were so huge for it. They were going to have to actually take a bridge apart that people use every day to conduct their daily life. So this asshole can get his fucking super yacht built. Yeah. And they finally said, no, we can't do it. We're shutting it down. Thank God somebody's common sense prevailed at the end. And this guy's zeros after his name didn't why doesn't he add the $sign to the end of Bezos? Like a lot of those rap guys do it. Yeah. They just came out with their first record. They have $14 to their name and they put the $sign in.
Oh man.
Dr. Riz or whatever it is. I mean, Bezos should literally adopt the $sign. He should have his name officially changed to have the S as a $sign. That would be so welcome. Much more fitting.
We just gave them another $1 million idea. You're welcome. Bezos. His street cred would go through the roof. If he added a $sign.
At 5'7", that'd give him an extra 2 inches, I think.
So, Jeff Bezos, here's the idea, $1 million idea. Just take the S, remove the S, and put the $sign. Bezos.
Exactly. Bays ching. Make the noise. Bays ching.
Bezos. There was something that we were going to do. I'm going to have to look back now. There was something that we were going to do every time we'd give $1 million idea. I don't remember what that was. I can barely remember 2 episodes ago. I can barely remember what I said 10 minutes ago. Who sent you? Yeah, that's what we'll do. We'll just put that in there. We'll just put that in there every time we come up with $1 million idea. Okay. So, is this a good place to jump off?
I think so. Let's jump off the bridge.
The Bezos bridge. I often also play the game with myself on like, okay, so if I had $100 million, what would be the first thing that I would do? And I think I would probably call a person that I know who is a high net worth accountant. That's probably the first call that I would make. I would probably call that person before I even called my wife.
Yeah, they say that's the first thing that you should do is, find somebody that might have some clue. I mean, what a liability, too, because as soon as everybody found out, and, they don't necessarily make those lottery winners tell you what their names are anymore, but people are going to know. They're going to piece together why Larry... Larry was at the soup kitchen for the last 17 years cooking meals, and suddenly he's not here. And the next thing you know, he's jetting off to Paris. And the next thing you know, and the next thing you know, and the next thing you know.
There are some states, and I believe the state you and I live in actually does allow them to disclose who the winner of. But there are some states where it'll remain anonymous, and I think that would be the biggest issue. Would be the amount of extra stress that would add to Jack Hansen's life. Because immediately, anybody who you've ever crossed paths with is going to immediately think about you differently than they did yesterday. And I think for a lot of people, that in and of itself is a very stressful thought and idea.
Well, how could it not? Like, I have a girlfriend who I love dearly and would marry, quite frankly. So it's not that thankfully I wouldn't be in that position, because if something like that were to happen now, it's like, well, this doesn't change a thing about how I feel about you. It's going to complicate a ton if we don't get rid of most of this soon. Well, because it's going to complicate a lot. But imagine if you're one of those lonely people, or one of those people that really wants a companion or a partner in life, and this happened to you. How would you? I mean, even the best person,
a person you and I both know, I think we have an idea of who that person might be.
Well, I like to think of, look, I'm as, dog-ass man as the next guy. Sure, I'm interested, I want to be attracted to my partner. So, I recognize facial features and body parts and nice hair just as much as the next person does. I think if you're young enough, those things are in play. I don't think they're necessarily bad. I think you can be a shallow ass really easily, and you need to be careful. And that relationships don't last if they're premised on things that are just of those concepts, or they're just physical. Because there needs to be a person that you really like attached to them. But that notwithstanding...
We're talking about Stormy Daniels, aren't we, again? We're talking about Stormy Daniels.
How could you, even as the best person in the world, even as the most venerable human being on earth, how could you not meet someone that eventually said to you, hey, I have $1 billion in the bank, no matter how they came across?
Yeah.
How could that not impact your decision? I mean, I don't know. I guess maybe it wouldn't, but I feel like it might impact your decision the opposite way. Like, there was a man who, it was one of my aunt's husbands. So it was my mom's sister's husband. Yeah. After my aunt died, he started seeing this woman, very wealthy, like ridiculous wealth, but didn't, and she wanted him. She wanted to marry him, didn't care that he was a bus driver and all these things. I mean, they were it as far as she was concerned. He never would. He was like, nope, I don't want to. And I always feel like it's the fact that she was filthy, stinking rich that prevented him from wanting to do that. So it's not just that, oh, I'm going to marry you for the wrong reason because you have all this cash. It's also, I don't want to dirty my hands. This is too much for me to play around in. I don't like the idea of this. It just gets in the way.
Well, and let's take this scenario. I like that idea. Let's take this scenario a step further. And let's say that I'm your accountant that you call after you just won $100 million. First off, you're going to be pissed off when you find out how much the federal government is going to take of that. It's probably
I already know.
Be like maybe $20 million, I think, is what they're going to end up taking. If
I
not
already
more.
know. Oh, they'll take more than that.
They'll take more than that over the course of your lifetime. So that's one of the reasons why we're going to start a nonprofit, so that we can have a little bit of a tax shelter for the rest of your lifetime.
Yeah, but I don't want to start a nonprofit to make a tax shelter. That's the thing. That's where I'm immediately going to stop you and say, look, the purpose of me starting a not-for-profit is not to make a tax shelter.
But let me ask you this.
The purpose for starting a nonprofit is to help people and not take in something for profit.
Well, but we want to do the most with the resources that you've been given, right? So now listen to me. I'm giving you the sales pitch. Okay, but first, let's go back to your significant other. Do you and your significant other view money the same?
I'm not sure that anybody views money quite the same. I think my significant other is significantly younger than me and doesn't have any experience commingling money with a partner, whereas I have in the past. But that doesn't necessarily mean that she isn't better at it in some ways than me, or maybe more skilled at it, because I may have messed up doing that in my own past.
So if she walked into Target and you walked into Target, what do you think she would walk out with, and what do you think you would walk out with? And this is a trick question.
Well, I don't want anything at Target. You picked a tough store, because I'm not taking much home from Target. I can tell you that.
She can buy anything in the store. She can buy anything in that store. What do you think she would walk out with, and what do you think you would walk out with?
She would probably, again, it's Target, though. I would say if we walked into a store where I would actually buy something that had something that I wanted, she would be more inclined to purchase something that she needed over something that I wanted, and I would be vice versa. I would be the opposite of that.
See, and that goes to show your character, because you are a very caring person, Jack Hansen. You know what I would walk out with?
Her? No, I'm kidding.
Probably nothing.
Well, yeah, from Target. I'm
sorry,
I'm
just one
Target.
of those people,
though. The Target account.
But I'm also one of those people who will spend an hour in a store and I'll buy nothing. And for my wife, that's a very hard thing. My wife will watch me go through that process where I will buy nothing, and she'll be like, "What are you doing? You have to buy something."
Well, I buy an awful lot of things for her. I will say that, because she doesn't like to spend money at all. Like she doesn't want for a lot, but she also doesn't want for a lot of the things that she needs. And so I wind up buying her a lot of the things that she needs. And some of it's stuff that I have no business buying, like bras, and stuff like that. And so I'm asking all these questions and see, that's a moment that the Victoria's Secret lady never sees coming either. When you go in and you're just like, yeah, I'm looking for a few bras from my girlfriend, what size is she?
We've never heard that before.
And then she's like, well, so we have something in a scintillating red here with a lace and this thing. And I'm like, no, you got it all wrong. This isn't for me. This is literally for her. And it's about as utilitarian as it can get. Show me like your granny bras, the ones that literally are just like, there's no padding, there's no pushing up, there's no frills. There's just, it holds your boobs in place if you're a lady that has them, and you can get through your day and it doesn't like scar you at the end of the day. That's what she's looking for. They don't see that coming. But I have to do this because my poor girlfriend, she just doesn't want to spend the money on it. And so I wind up being the one that's not too far from being a true story. I actually took her with me, though. I was like, look, I will buy you some, but you have to go with me. I'm not going to be that guy.
Yeah. And the Victoria's Secret
by myself.
The Victoria's Secret sales lady says, yeah, we've never heard that one before, Mr. Hansen.
And by the way, what is this big fucking secret? All the bras are out,
right? And
all the panties are on the models.
We know what you sell.
What is the secret? I don't understand what the secret is.
I think it's for It's for the imagination of the mind, really. Ooh, I like this. This could almost be a theme song, couldn't it?
Yeah, I suppose it could.
What are we listening to today?
This is the song that I referenced earlier in the podcast from Threshold called Mission Profile.
Oh, very good. All right, Jack Hansen, until we meet again.
Sounds good, Michael Elliott. We'll look forward to it.
Well, it looks like Jack and Michael have finished up their latest chat about all things existence. But if anything they said got your own Existence Brewing, be sure and catch their other talks at existencebrewing.com and drop them an email to share your thoughts using contact@existencebrewing.com.
Existence Brewing.